Hello everyone, you're listening to the Eiffel Tower podcast. My name is Oliver G. I'm an Australian in Paris. I've been here for 5 years, and I've been doing this podcast for 3 years. If this is your first ever time listening, welcome. You've come at a pretty good point. You've come at a great point, actually. This is a bonus episode, a rare bonus episode. But to explain that, I need to just rewind a little second. So let me tell you, this season of the show, I'm going through all the arrondissements, the 20 districts of the city of Paris, and one by one, I'm exploring them with someone who kind of knows best. Maybe they live there, maybe they have a shop there, or whatever. Anyway, I've done the first 4. I'm going to do number 5 on Monday next week. But today's guest is slipping in between the 4th and the 5th, and there's a very good reason for it. Today's guest is Elaine Sciolino, an American who's written a book called The Seine, the River That Made Paris. Now, the Seine River geographically runs right between many districts, but it also runs between the 4th and the 5th, which was one of the reasons why I chose to do this as a bonus episode now. But also, her book about the Seine has been the book club choice for the month. So for all of January, a lot of people have been reading it, sharing their thoughts about it, sharing their playlists, sharing their Seine stories, all on Facebook, free to join. I think there's about 800 members in this book club now. So if you're not part of it, go and check it out. Anyway, the idea is that Elaine and I have a little chat about the Seine, about the book, and about a lot more. You're going to hear I met her in her apartment in the 9th arrondissement, and we had a really good, fun chat. A lot of you, in fact, if you're in the book club, you would have already seen pictures of it and of her amazing apartment and bookshelves. But anyway, enough about that. That's what's coming up. I just wanted to say this show is brought to you by My Private Paris. That is a tour company. They do tours all over the city. You're probably very familiar with the voice of Bertrand already, who's been coming on at the end of the episodes. Surprise today, you're going to hear from his colleague. She describes herself as the heart of the company. Her name is Marie, and she's going to be talking about a special place to find on the banks of the Seine. So get ready for that at the end of the episode. And that's enough, I think. Let's get straight into this bonus episode. You're listening to the Eiffel Tower, Elaine Sciolino talking about the Seine, the river that made Paris. Let's do it. Usually here's where I tell people, welcome to my studio. It's not that way at all today. We're in your apartment. It's a rare apartment episode of the Eiffel Tower. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to be had because it kind of is a journey down memory lane because we've done this before, haven't we?
Exactly right. So we go back quite a way, at least in the...
I was there at the beginning.
Yeah, you were literally the second episode. So for the people listening at home who maybe are new listeners or haven't been there since the beginning, Elaine and I met over 3 years ago at the Shakespeare & Company book, which is very fitting for an author that I met you at the bookshop in Paris. But we were talking about Rue des Martyrs.
We were talking about the Rue des Martyrs, the only street in Paris.
Which was how you were introduced to this show. But now we're not talking about that. We're going on to less of a road and more of a river, I think it would be fair to say. The Seine. Your new book that I've got in my hand, The Seine, the River That Made Paris, which has also been the book club book for this month, and people have been really into it. Have you found a similar reaction as you've been traveling around the United States?
Oliver, I did something really crazy. I went on a 2-month road trip and did 50 events, which is kind of nutty. I felt like I was on a political campaign. I understand what American presidential candidates feel like.
Did it tire you out?
Yes, it was exhausting because you're sleeping in a different bed every single night with sometimes bad pillows, but you're meeting...
I thought you were going to say with a different person every night. That's a different podcast.
That's a different podcast. That's a way different podcast. A different venue just about every day, every night, different audiences. And what was so wonderful for me, though, is that I got to engage with the audience. It almost didn't make any difference if I was on a radio show or if I was well reviewed or how many books were selling, because every single day I got to have what we call in French the partage, the sharing, and be with people who wanted to hear me talk or wanted to read my book. And it was also a way for me to rediscover America.
And do Americans typically have, I mean, I know this and I know that you know this, I know that Americans like Paris, but do they also have an appetite for the Seine River?
Well, the Seine River made Paris. There wouldn't have been a Paris without the Seine. It started in an island in the middle of the Seine, so Paris and the Seine, in a way, are one.
Do you think that people know? I mean, like when you talk, if you were to pick a random American or random person around the world, do they associate the Seine with Paris? I mean, I've lived here so long now, I don't even know what everyone knows anymore. Is it one of these sort of main rivers in the world?
It's the most romantic river in the world, that's for sure. And even if you've never come to Paris, you know Paris and you know the Seine because you've either seen Paris and the Seine in movies, or you've listened to romantic songs about Paris,
Sure.
or you've seen pictures of the Eiffel Tower with the Seine flowing in front.
Audrey Hepburn.
Audrey Hepburn on the Seine with Cary Grant in a bateau mouche tourist boat. Yes, exactly. It was people of a certain age. But look at La La Land. I mean, look at how many people saw La La Land. The whole movie is set in California, and suddenly Ryan Gosling and what's her name?
Emma Stone
are dancing on the banks of the Seine.
Right.
I mean, it was crazy. It was surreal.
Did you like the movie?
Scene.
That's a no. That's such a hesitation.
I liked it and I didn't like it, but I loved I loved the scenes on the Seine, though.
Yeah.
I loved that suddenly you're swept away from reality and you're in this magical, glittery world of the water where they're dancing on stones with lights flowing. And I mean, don't you feel the Seine is romantic? I mean, think about your own life.
I feel it's the pulse of the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone who has been following this channel closely knows I proposed to my own wife on one of the bridges of the
Well,
Seine.
I was waiting for you to say that, but that's why I call it the most romantic river in the world. You wouldn't have proposed to her on the Thames, would you?
No, absolutely not.
No, or the Tiber.
No.
Or the Yangtze.
I can't think of another river I would have proposed on.
Precisely, and that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah. And a little shout out before we continue back to America for a sec. I understand some of the listeners to this podcast came and said hello to you. Is that right?
You're not going to believe it. Here I'm in the middle of nowhere in America, and someone came up to me at the end of a talk and said, "Oh my gosh, I heard you on the Eiffel Tower," and I'm going, "What?" But that was 3 years ago. So you have a real following in Amérique Profonde, in deep America.
The Eiffel Tower listeners are the best podcast listeners in the world, and that has long been established on this show at least. But also the book has been the subject of the book club, and there's some questions specifically from listeners and book club members that I'm going to share with you at the end. And you've, by being on the show, you've committed to answering them, no matter what they are. You're shaking your head a little bit there.
That's great. I'm ready.
But let's talk about. You know what I was actually interested in? Is there a question that everybody asks you on the book tour that you're sick of answering?
No.
Really? Wasn't there one that you're like, oh, that's a bit lame?
Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you the one that drives me absolutely crazy.
Okay, great.
Can you tell us what's going to be your next book?
Yeah.
And that drives me crazy because I just want to enjoy this one. This one took a long time to write. I put my heart and soul in it. I researched it to death because the Seine is a long river. It's a deep river. It's profoundly, it's not physically deep, but it's a profound river to get to know and to understand. And I want to savor every moment of after the publication of the book. I don't want to think about what's next.
That's interesting because I've asked that question to people before. I think it's a nice way to round up an interview with people sometimes, but now that you say it, I realize that could be quite annoying for someone who wants to focus on their current project.
You know, it's like eating a good meal. What I learned about living in France is that the way you eat a meal here is you think about what you might want to cook. Then you go to the marché and you choose what you're going to make. Then you make it. Then you eat it. Then after you've eaten it, you talk about what you have eaten and you prolong the experience. You don't immediately start preparing the next meal. And that's what I want to do. I want to just savor what I've done and kind of play with it and enjoy it. And I'm even writing some stories for the New York Times that are kind of the unfinished business of the book for a newspaper audience.
Okay, well, let's keep savoring the Seine. I'm quite happy to do it.
Savor the Seine. Good, I like that.
It's a beautiful river. Let's talk practical here for people who don't. And imagining a map of Paris right now, everyone that's listening knows already that I'm going through the arrondissements. The Seine perfectly fits between the arrondissements this week, and you're the book club, so it fits perfectly. But from a very practical point of view, if you had to pick, and this might be a bit of a tough question, but if you had to pick one place where you're going to spend the whole day looking at the river, and as I'm saying this, I remember there's a bit down near the Notre Dame that you like sitting on. Was that sunrise?
Yes.
So besides that...
No, besides...
Is there...
But your listeners aren't going to necessarily know that. So
no, but they like... yeah, well, don't forget that people in the book club have read the book as well.
Oh, I see. So you want to keep it
but let's start with why you like the Notre Dame view.
No, I just like if I'm I'm sometimes an insomniac, and if I'm up and it's the sort of wee hours of the night, and I don't I'm not getting up and I'm not going to sleep. I'll wake up and I'll get myself dressed and go out and go to the Pont Alexandre III before the sun's come up and look at the back of Notre Dame as the sun suddenly opens up the sky and turns the back of Notre Dame a bright orange.
So when you're saying the back, the Tournelle one is that the one with the big...
It's the one with the Saint-Geneviève statue that looks like a missile, yes.
That's right. It looks a bit like something from Lord of the Rings.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. I was standing on that when the cathedral was burning. Where were you?
I was in New York, and I saw it on television, literally walking into an office building, and there it was on CNN. And then I got a phone call from my husband saying, Elaine, you're not going to believe this, but I think I see a fireboat in the river. There's an angle here, and my book was already printed.
Right.
And suddenly I am confronted with, oh my gosh, there is the fact that the Seine, the river, my river, played a role in putting out the fire.
It was nice the way that story came together. It's at the beginning of this book, isn't it?
It's the last chapter of the book, which I had to write very quickly because the book was already in print.
That's right.
It had been sent out to reviewers, it had been sent out to fact checkers, and it was going to be published in weeks. And there's only a few things you can do if that's the case. You can throw yourself out the window, you can take to drink and take to your bed and eat bonbons and drink good brandy, or you can say, I'm going to sit down and write another chapter very quickly, which is what I did.
That's interesting because you'd have the reaction to the Notre Dame burning and then separate. I thought about this a lot at the time because there are a lot of people in this city whose job relies on the Notre Dame being there. For example, a tour guide or these kind of people who are having this reaction, oh my God, the Notre Dame's burning down, and on the other side they're going, oh, my job's going out the window as well. That must have been a weird feeling for you.
Well, it was weird. It was weird, except that in real time, the Seine, the firefighters were using the water of the Seine to put out the fire, and half the water that was used to put out the fire of Notre Dame came from the Seine River. And so it was less panic than just saying, I have to do this. I mean, it not only was for the book, but it was to tell the story and to fit in a tiny, tiny little bit of history.
I knew it was at the end of the book, but I realized why I thought it was at the start is because I read it in a newspaper somewhere before I got my hands on the book. So that was people at home who think I haven't read the book. I have, but let's
Of course, you've read the book. You do your homework.
I've got another question. Instead of the one where I said a favorite place to be, I've got a different question for you.
Okay.
And in the meantime, while you're answering, I'm going to get the questions up from the book club readers. But if you're imagining a map of the Seine and you have to walk from one end to the other, are there sides that you think are better to be on, or could you even map me out the ideal walk from one end to the other? Like, is it always stay on the right bank, for example?
Well, that's a big question because the whole Seine is almost 500 miles long, and
I can't believe it. It's 777, right?
Yeah.
Kilometers.
Yes.
That's insane.
Yes. But if it were a straight line, it would be half that because it's just a very curvy river, and you can't walk the entire length of the Seine.
Yeah.
I wanted to do it with my husband, but you start and all of a sudden you end up in private property, some
Sure.
kind of farmland in deep Burgundy where there are more cows than people,
Yeah.
or you end up in a terrible industrial dead zone where you don't even want to think about trying to maneuver along the river because there's no path. So that's very different from the Seine in Paris, which you may be asking about.
But does that frustrate you that people typically think Seine in Paris when obviously the Seine is half of France?
Gosh, when I started the book, I had absolutely no idea what I was getting myself into. I thought, okay, it'll be Paris plus.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. Because the Seine for the French is not one river.
No.
It's lots of different rivers. It moves in different départements. And the Seine at its source, all it is little springs bubbling up from the ground, where the Seine at the estuary is this wide mouth to the sea.
Do you, when you die one day, do you want to be put into a boat on the Seine like a Viking and let off into the sea?
No, I don't. I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and my river was the Niagara.
Sure, that's right next to the Niagara Falls, right? Buffalo. Isn't
Yes,
it? Yeah.
that's right. And the Niagara River goes into Niagara Falls. And we grew up very modestly. We grew up in the same house as one set of grandparents. But you could look out across the park that was across the street from where we lived, and down a hill, and you could see the Niagara River, and you could see where it moved into Lake Erie. And so from the time I was a little kid, I had this visceral attachment to the Niagara. And if my ashes are going to be thrown anywhere, it would be over the falls.
Right. Do people do that there?
I have no idea. You're just asking me a question I've never thought of any time in my entire life.
Here are a couple of questions from the book club. And just for everyone at home, the book club, the Eiffel Tower Book Club on Facebook, join the 809 members, including Elaine. But Julie Ward says, have you considered writing an autobiography? Your career as a journalist covering the international realm seems so exciting.
No, I've never considered writing an autobiography. And it's not that I don't think I've had an interesting life. I've had a very rich life, and I'm really blessed. But if I wrote about my years as a journalist, for example, I would have to write about covering the Iranian Revolution, or covering the Iran-Iraq War, or being put for a day in a Syrian prison, or being locked in a room by Colonel Gaddafi after the interview was over. But young women today who are foreign correspondents or war correspondents and war photographers are much braver and bolder than I am, and have extraordinary stories to tell. And I was one of the first generations of female foreign war correspondents, but much of it, I was safe. I worked for a news magazine. You didn't have to go out to the front lines all the time. And I admire those who are out in places like Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan day after day after day.
Right. I feel like Julie has broken the golden question of asking your next book there as well, by asking if you're going to write an autobiography. So we'll forgive her.
You want to know what my next book could be? I
thought that was the one question we don't talk about.
Well, yes, but since you raised it, why not a children's book on the little boat that could, the one fireboat that saved Notre Dame?
Yeah.
That wouldn't be bad.
You should be careful saying that. Someone will steal your idea.
Someone will steal my idea.
Yeah.
You know what? If you're going to steal my idea, that's life. I've given it away. But
how about a question from Cindy? And she says, how often, I like this, it's a writer's question, how often does an editor want you to change something, and then you have to fight to keep your original words?
Oh, all the time.
How hard do you fight?
You threaten to take the book away to another book publisher if you have to.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Don't you think that it would be easier if an editor said, like a suggestion rather than a change? Or are all their changes
We're
suggestions?
playing hardball here. You've got hardball American publishers who want the book. I'll tell you a great story. How's this? I was writing my Iran book, and I owned Iran, right? I had interviewed Ayatollah Khomeini in Paris, the first woman, first American to interview the father of the revolution. I went on his plane from Paris to Iran. I was there for the revolution. when the American hostages were taken. I happened to have a visa in my passport. I was there the next morning. I go to write a book. I hand in the first 40,000 words. The editor calls me up and says, I have 2 words for you. What do you think the 2 words were, Oliver?
I don't even dare guess. Do you want me to guess?
Yeah, I want you to guess.
Too serious.
Close, but no cigar.
Oh,
How about start over?
What? They're the worst 2 words you could hear.
2 words. It was not good job. It was not great job.
Why?
It was start over.
Okay.
He said, you are not writing this book for the 100 scholars in America on Iran.
Right.
You are writing this book for average Americans.
So I was kind of right a little bit. I was on the right track.
You were on the right track, but it would if it had been just too serious, it would have been more palatable.
Of course.
When it was start over, that was literary thermonuclear war.
Wow. And 40,000 words too.
Yep.
Wow. I feel like we could go down a long and interesting discussion on that, but I'm going to pull it back to the Seine in Paris. And get you to promise to be on the show again at some point, so we can delve into the deep recesses of your history. But back to the Seine, and specifically in Paris, I know that you said that the Seine, it sort of brought you to Paris when you were younger. It's been a sort of special connection for you. Do you think that's something that's shared by a lot of people about Paris? Do you think this kind of, or do you find that's quite private for you?
I honestly think that no matter how bad a day you're having, if you walk over one of the bridges of the Seine and you stand in the middle of the river and you look at the Eiffel Tower and the sun setting behind it, you've got to think it's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's a connection between the bridges and the river. There's an intimacy because the river is narrow and it's beautifully constructed on both sides. You sort of feel like you've got a museum of the riverbanks are kind of like a moving museum. And because you're so close to the river, there's an intimacy and a feeling that you belong to the river. And I have never felt désespéré, desperate, when I'm on a bridge looking at the river.
Mm-hmm. Good answer. I love the river too. I love it. I think what you said about the bridges, the whole history of Pont Neuf and how people would go out there to get that view of the city. This has been going on for hundreds of years, and I think it probably feels just as charming now as it did to the people in the first days.
Well, and even sometimes people have asked me about, aren't you sugarcoating the river, and there's a dark side, and what about suicides on the river? And there are suicides off the bridges into the Seine, and Les Miserables, Javert, the police inspector, it's the most famous suicide in French literature. But I also in the book have cases of writers, for example, who, one writer in particular who went out to commit suicide, and he got out on one of the bridges and he said, it's just such a glorious day. I think I'll put it off for another time.
Wow. Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. And a powerful river. Let's pull it back to this room here. We're in do you do your writing in this room?
Well, right now we're sitting in what they would call the salon. And this building was built in 1837, way before Haussmann transformed Paris, the prefect of the Seine, who was tasked by Napoleon III with changing the view of Paris, and he either destroyed or saved Paris, depending on your perspective. But this neighborhood was too insignificant for Haussmann, and this is an example of a room that's looked like this since back then.
Now, I'm nowhere near as good as you are at describing, but we're talking, what do you call this fancy ceiling here? What is this?
Oh, look you can see like the dentelle, the teeth, those little those little things that stick out like like bricks.
It's very intricate.
Yeah.
The whole
and
thing.
then the rosette, the little things there.
So this is pre Haussmann, and he wasn't interested in this area.
No. We were just this was not a rich, fancy neighborhood. This was moving up to Montmartre. It was populaire working class Paris in a way. But you asked me where I work. I work in the room next door, which is technically the dining room, and I take over the dining room table. So whenever we have people for dinner, we either have to go into the kitchen or I have to move all of my files.
And is that the room that we were in before with all the books on the wall about Paris?
Yes.
Okay, so what we'll have to do, I think it's a special treat for the book club members, is take some pictures and videos of all these books so that they can understand how much research goes into a book like this. But let's wind it up with a question that's outside of the Seine. It's a question I like to ask guests. Imagine, this is a very common question I ask. Imagine that you're for reasons unknown told that you have to leave Paris tomorrow and today, or you've got your last full day in Paris. But there's some weird rule that means you have to spend it all in one certain arrondissement of your choice, right? Where would you spend your final day and how would you spend it?
Oh, no question. I would spend it right in my neighborhood, in the 9th arrondissement, on the Rue des Martyrs, because it's the place in Paris where I belong. I love being able to go to the fish market and have Akim say to me, "So, did the poached salmon work the other night for your dinner party?" Or go into the little Italian épicerie that reminds me of the épicerie that my father had, and I go in there and I speak Italian, and they helped me make cannoli, which is kind of hard to make, the Sicilian pastry, and we were really experimenting with the cream, and they finally said, and I walked in and I said, the cannoli turned out perfect.
Right.
And this partage, this sharing, this wonderful, there's a free book exchange the third Sunday of every month, and I brought some books, and one was this absolutely fabulous illustrated medical book, but it had all fallen apart. And this guy said, "Oh, my son's a doctor. I'd love to give that to him." So this is
amazing.
The joys of daily life.
It's like a community up here, huh?
It still is.
Have you ever gone into that Italian shop and said, "Take the gun, leave the cannoli"? You ever said that? That
is a stereotype, and I'm not going to accept that.
I watched The Godfather over Christmas,
yes.
And I realized how much it's seeping into my daily life.
Yes.
It might not be a good thing. But we can make a list of all the things we've referenced in this episode now. Les Miserables, La La Land, and The Godfather. You can't deny that's a good weekend.
We're quite elevated, aren't we?
We do all right.
We know our movies, we know our literature.
We do all right, Elaine. But everybody, the Seine, the river that made Paris, if you haven't read it already, go and get your hands on it. If you're in the book club, go in and put some comments. Elaine, you'll be in there checking out the comments, won't you?
Of course I will.
And a big shout out to Julie Ward, whose question that I asked before, who also put in a very extensive Spotify playlist. It must have been like 30, 40, 50 songs that go with your book.
Oh my gosh, let's do a whole other show and play some of the songs and have some fun with music.
Sounds like a good idea. I'll see you for that one, Elaine. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Well, thank you.
So everyone, as I said, I'm hanging around at the end of this episode with Marie, a new voice that you haven't heard before, but you're going to get used to her. She's from My Private Paris, and she's here explaining a little tip on the Seine. Welcome to the studio, Marie.
Merci, bonjour.
Bonjour, how are you?
I'm very good, and you?
I'm exceptionally well.
That's great.
People have never heard your voice before.
Yes, okay.
So maybe in 30 seconds, you could tell me who you are and what you're doing here.
Okay, so I'm a Parisian. I'm also a tour guide, and I love to share everything I know about my city. So that's why I'm here.
And is it true that you know the city inside out and upside down?
Let's say that I know it pretty well.
Okay.
And
I'm excited to investigate this knowledge in the coming weeks. And you guys at home will hear a lot more from Marie talking about the 5th arrondissement next week. But right now we're going to talk about the Seine and one specific place that we should go and find.
Yeah, of course. So the Seine is known for its bridges, right? So I would say if you have to see one, it's the bridge Pont Alexandre III, Alexander III. It's known from all over the movies and photo shoots and stuff, but it's absolutely glamorous and beautiful. It's all goldy, and you have those beautiful lampposts and statues. It's where basically, if you want to have your picture done and in the most glamorous way, this will be the bridge to do it, because you have the Eiffel Tower on the back. And and so it's just so beautiful.
I love when you say Eiffel Tower. It sounds to me like Eiffel Tower, or maybe I've just been doing this podcast for too long. But don't you think people also think the Bir Hakeim Bridge is a good one for photo shoots?
For the Eiffel Tower only, but the bridge itself, it's just very common. I mean, it's beautiful for if you like the metro going up.
I think that's kind of cool though.
It's cool. I love it. It's just if you want something more picturesque, like something more Parisian, let's say, in the sense
it's
that
very glamorous, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Like if you all dressed up, you will go on Pont Alexandre III. Pont Bir Hakeim, it's really just for the Eiffel Tower on the back. You see what I mean?
What about, here's a question before we get down from the Pont Alexandre III. How many wedding photos do you think are taken on that bridge every day?
That's a very good question. I mean, just myself, I probably saw maybe 20 already in my life.
Really?
So I just assume it's every 5 minutes or something.
I think so. I think on a summer day with blue skies, I would say there's one every 20 minutes.
Probably.
Yeah. I think a lot of people's wedding photos have another bride in the background, like in the distant back. Anyway, so we're on this Pont Alexandre III.
Yes.
Then you say go down?
You just go down. You have some steps. You just go down. And there you have the quay that now they're all pedestrian, you can go with the bike, you can run. And many péniches, many boats are now there. And a few of them, you can really have fun on them. I think about the Rosa Bonheur, for example.
Is that like a discotheque?
Yeah, it's a discotheque, but on the boat on the Seine River.
Right.
And just across there, you have a pizza place and just a place to have cocktails. So it's really nice.
Is the Rosa Bonheur, is that a gay bar?
No. It's not especially.
Because I know that there's a Rosa Bonheur in the Butte-Chaumont.
Yes.
And that on Sunday nights it turns into a gay bar.
They probably have special nights, but it's not known as a gay place.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And when you go down to these péniches and stuff, you don't need reservations or anything? You
No. That's what is cool about Rosa Bonheur. On this one in particular, it's just it's very old fashioned. Like even the songs are
really?
It's like the best of the the year 2000 or so.
Really?
So it's all about Britney Spears and stuff like that. So it's fun. It's fun.
When I check out this bar, I've not been there before. Is it? I don't know why, but I have the sense that it would be very expensive for drinks.
No, not. I mean, like everywhere else, not something too fancy.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to things that are too fancy. So if I can go, you can go.
Okay, we're on the same page there. So it's cool. Maybe better in summer.
Yes, definitely in summer, and you can just get a tan before and then
sit up on the grass by
nice. But on the Esplanade des Invalides, which is just there.
That sounds like a perfect summer's day.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing it. Now you're going to be on the show. Next week, it's all about you talking about the fifth arrondissement. Can you give us a teaser of what we're going to be exploring over there?
I will give you all the little secret place of the fifth arrondissement, and I hope you're gonna follow me next time.
I'm excited because you did say you know every cobblestone.
Oh, yes.
All right, that's something to look forward to. Everybody at home, if you don't know what you're listening to, this Eiffel Tower season is going through all the arrondissements in order with an expert shining a light on them. So today was the Seine. We're between two arrondissements, fair enough. Next Monday, it's the 5th with Marie from My Private Paris, and onwards until we get to 20. Marie, see you next week.
Okay, see you next week.
I don't really